Brown from the UNODC, just to provide a brief overview on the intentions and how the support of UNODC to the Fiji government. Naka.
Thanks, Joeli, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you this morning, and I do want to acknowledge all of our distinguished guests and all the other invited guests who are joining with us this morning. This is a very timely and important event, and so I do bring you greetings from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, but also from the wider UN system in Fiji. As I reflect on my own 1 year plus tenure in Fiji, I really must acknowledge the wonderful partnership that we've had with the government of Fiji, but also with our other partners, both our civil society partners, our NGO partners, but also with our international partners in Fiji and also the wider region. And so we certainly look forward to strengthening and expanding these partnerships as we move forward. I want to take a few minutes, if I can, and just share some global perspective as we are considering the topic of the day, and just sharing some global perspective on the issue of drugs. UNODC's most recent World Drug Report in 2023 noted that drug use continues to be high worldwide. In 2021, 1 in every 17 persons aged 15 to 64 had used a drug in the past 12 months. And of course, of much concern was the fact that the estimated number of users grew from 240 million in 2011 to 296 million in 2021. This was a 23% increase and represented almost 6% of the global population aged 15 to 64. Of course, cannabis was the most used drug, with an estimated 219 million users, which represented about 4.3% of the global adult population. At the same time, it was estimated that in 2021, 36 million people had used amphetamine-type stimulants. The proportion of female users were higher in the case of amphetamine-type stimulants, where 45% of users were women. Globally, illicit drug markets continue to expand in terms of harm as well as scope, to include the relentless spread of synthetic drugs. It's cheap, it's easy to manufacture anywhere in the world, and in the case of fentanyl, it's deadly even in the smallest of doses. And so addiction to drug use continues to harm health, and certainly including mental health. But unfortunately, stigma and discrimination makes it less likely that people who use drugs will get the help that they need. However, it must be understood that addiction to drugs is not unlike other chronic physical health problems, whether it's heart disease, diabetes, and of course, in which some of these we are familiar. But it can also affect our families, siblings, mothers, fathers, and any other members of our families. And so fewer than 20% of people with drug use disorders are in treatment, and access is certainly highly unequal. Women account for almost half the people who use amphetamine-type stimulants, but only 27% of those receiving treatment. And so drug challenges pose difficult policy dilemmas that cannot be addressed by any one country alone. I share this information because, as we all know, Fiji has not been immune from the scourge of illicit drugs. and as we continue to see evidence of extensive trafficking into and through the country. Organized crime networks have the ingredients in place to continue to grow their business, including the territory to produce, the access to precursor chemicals, established trafficking routes, and the cross-border relationships to move their products to market. Unfortunately, Fiji is becoming a target with a growing population of persons with growing demand. The social consequences of increased drug use are significant, but unfortunately, health and harm reduction services remain limited in Fiji, but also across the region. And so without robust and comprehensive responses, Fiji, and might I say the region, will continue to grow into an expanded marketplace. And so as such, we must have and we must explore a balanced strategy that does not rely only on supply reduction through law enforcement efforts, but certainly and equally addressing the need to expand access to treatment and rehabilitation to reduce demand which attracts these criminal networks. I do applaud the efforts underway at the moment, and the minister this morning made reference to the strategy. And so I do applaud some of these efforts that are underway, and certainly if implemented, can have significant impact and can counter many of these problems. Certainly the national countering illicit narcotics strategy that the minister mentioned, and certainly in the current climate of the HIV epidemic, efforts to respond to the HIV crisis, among others. However, if these are to succeed, they require contributions from all levels of government, communities, including faith and local communities, civil society, and indeed the private sector. And I'll certainly add my voice to the remarks this morning that government alone cannot solve these problems. But at the same time, despite the challenges that are currently facing Fiji, I do see numerous opportunities to begin addressing this in a real way. And so our presence here this morning and over the next 2 days builds on a similar event that we had in 2019, and which provides an opportunity to begin a collective dialogue and responses to these issues. But dialogue is not enough. It must be followed by action. I think we would all agree that Fiji is at a crossroads in how she will respond to not only the supply of illicit drugs through very sophisticated criminal networks, but also to stem the demand across the country to consume drugs. No longer is Fiji a highway for illicit drugs moving through the region to more lucrative markets, but it's now become an exit ramp for a domestic market. And we're seeing the effects of this, including reports of increasing addiction to methamphetamines, rising HIV transmission rates directly related to injecting drug use. And so responses must be deliberate, targeted, and to be accompanied by the necessary resources and collective will to make a difference. And so let me conclude by noting that if there was ever a time for all hands to be on deck in Fiji, it is now. It requires a national response that includes every village, every city, and certainly every province. Despite all these challenges, I think Fiji has the opportunity to learn from the good and the bad lessons previously employed by countries in the global north and south, and an opportunity to get this right. And I think that's one of for me, the bright lights that I see is that opportunity to get it right exists in Fiji. But it does require that collective response. Notably, what is done in Fiji has the potential to provide lessons as well to the rest of the region. Because this is not just a Fiji problem. This is a regional problem that we're seeing across the region. Drug trafficking, addiction, rising addiction issues that's related to the drugs that's coming in from Fiji. And one of the interesting points, I call it, Fiji being squeezed, in that vice, because we're seeing drugs coming in from Southeast Asia, we're seeing drugs coming in from the Americas, and certainly we see drugs coming in from other places, Canada as well. But this collective flow of drugs that's coming in certainly requires not only a domestic response, but it requires also a regional and an interregional response if we're going to be successful. And so I do look forward to the outcomes of the symposium, and certainly look forward to continuing our efforts and our partnership with the government and certainly to all of our other counterparts in addressing this issue. Thank you very much.